So with that, I want to dive into it. First of all, thank you all for attending, registering for Bulletproof Bookkeeping webinars. We do this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific. And 3 weeks out of the usual 4 that we have any given month, I do this for fun and for free for the public. Once a week, we lock it up for only those who have signed up for the Bulletproof Bookkeeping course. And that, by the way, is a Q&A session that we do every week. So people who are taking the course can come in with the questions that they might have encountered while they were working on the stuff or working with clients. We get a lot of client-specific questions, of course, without naming the clients. And we get into the answers. Last week when we did it, we had one of our students, for lack of a better word, who had some complex lending situations that he was involved in, and we went through the debits and credits and figured out how to record his loans, and some of it included some deferrals and some, pretty advanced stuff. So there's that. The other thing I want to mention while we're on the subject, and as I'm going to share my screen anyway, to dive right in, is I've just started sending out some emails and doing some social media posts about an upcoming offer that I'm going to be putting out there for the Bulletproof Bookkeeping class, which is going to include a 6-week training program with me. So I'm going to take a group through the whole Bulletproof Bookkeeping process, what it means, what it looks like, how it kind of works for any kind of business that you're in. In order to explain all this in much better detail than I can do right now in a minute, I'm doing a 6-part video series, which I just finished the last video this week on that. So I'm going to be ready to roll that out like in another week or two. But if you look at my website, at the top of every page, you can click on this and it'll take you over to a splash page that's just going to grab your name and email so I know you're interested. And as soon as the first video goes live, I'll send you an email, let you know that video is live. And then each time I release the next video, I'll send you a quick email letting you know. And then if you're interested in the actual offer, those videos, of course, are free. If you're interested in taking advantage of the offer, I'll give you, anybody who's on this early bird wait list will get first dibs at jumping in on the offer once I announce it officially. So there's that. So when you get a chance, if you haven't already, I know a lot of you have, because it's already like more than I expected. And I've only been mentioning this for since Sunday or something. But anyway, jump in and have at it. You can always jump in and then just not sign up for the offer when it goes live, but you definitely want these videos. I think you're going to learn a ton, even if you don't want the actual course, but hopefully you'll want the course. So anyway, tools for working remotely. I did the first one 2 weeks ago, and I just did kind of a high-level bird's eye view. We talked about a lot of different applications and that I feel like you might want to consider using, in an effort to work remotely, whether you're just starting out to work remotely because of everything that's going on, or you've been doing it for 10 years, but you're just looking for maybe a better, faster way kind of thing. I thought it would be useful to do, to kind of go wide, but not too deep, just to give you a lot of sort of food for thought, because then I know a lot of you will dive into the applications and figure a lot of it out on your own. But then what I did is in our Facebook group, Accounting Business Academy, I polled the group and I wanted to know which of these apps would you like to learn more about, and I got feedback, and I would have, of course, expected that G Suite would be, at or near the top of the list, but it wasn't only at or near the top of the list, it was like a landslide difference. How many people said they wanted more G Suite and Google information? And so what I did was that Friday, I scheduled it for our regular Friday webinar, which is the Zoom In with Seth, David, and Friends. And in that webinar, I called it more on tools for working remotely because I had already scheduled part 2 of this webinar. So I wanted to squeeze it in. And we did a deep dive on G Suite and Google. We went through the whole admin control panel and everything that's in there. We talked a bit about Drive File Stream and some of the other things that you get when you have G Suite. So if you want that, if you missed it, of course, the recording's up on my website, no charge. Just let me know if you don't know how to find it. Email me. I'll get you the link right to it. It's in the, the Nerd Buzz area where I put all the prior Zoom calls. So if you want that deep dive on G Suite, that's already done. It's there. But we are going to talk about G Suite some more today, just in a little different way, right? So in fact, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to look at G Suite, we're going to look at ClickUp, we're going to look at Slack, we're going to look at OneNote, and we're going to look at Dynalist, right? And so over here, by the way, if you're wondering, this is where you can, I've got the link, I can send it to you. This is the poll in the Facebook group. So feel free to come over here and cast more votes and there's other choices. These are just the top few. Because the more you tell me this is what you want to learn more of, the more I'm going to schedule content on this kind of stuff, right? So I do want to talk about G Suite a little bit today, like I said, and to that end, I want to talk a bit about, I really want to get into Drive File Stream, because what I want to look at now is I'm running a bookkeeping or an accounting practice, and how would I use this? What would this look like, right? So what you're looking at here is the website of Drive File Stream, where we keep our files in folder structures, right? And when we have Drive File Stream, what we have really is it's not a sync like a Dropbox or like you can do with ShareFile or some other tools. It's actually, as the name suggests, it's a stream. These files are basically streamed from the web to a location on your computer. And if you look here in my little application tray, there's the icon for Drive File Stream. So what you're going to do, if you have, assuming you have no familiarity with this, is up here in your settings, you're going to click on the settings wheel, assuming you've gotten in, you've set up your Google account, and then you're going to click here where it says Get Drive for Desktop, right? And that's going to install the application, and by default, it's going to set this up in a G drive, which makes it easy because G stands for Google, right? And so what happens is when you're accessing files there, the files don't live locally on your computer, even though it looks as if they do. The files are actually living on Google's server where they're kept and where they're probably a whole lot more secure than your own computer would be. Google can just afford much more security than you or I can. And when you open a file, it just puts it in a temporary location for a minute while you're working in it. The second you close that file, it's back up in Google Drive File Stream. So it's important to understand that because, one, it doesn't take up any space on your hard drive. You know, even if you're putting, you know, like Word docs and Excel files and things, which you can do. And what you get, of course, is here's the Windows side of it. And if you're on a Mac, of course, you can do the same thing with your Finder. And so here I have a Windows folder that looks, works, feels, acts just like any Windows folder that had the files in it. But like I said, you're really not accessing the files. You're accessing, it's a stream. It's like a remote virtual access to the files that are actually sitting on Google servers, right? You'll notice here on my left, there's my Google Drive File Stream folder right here. And there's my drive, okay? And then I had just gone ahead and gone into, you know, my folder structure here so that I could demonstrate this. So what I can do now is I'll create a new folder, and let's say this is for Client X, right? So I'm going to put all of Client X's files inside the Client X folder. And one of the first things I do when I'm setting this up with a client is I'll create a subfolder called Inbox, right? And it's important to think ahead. I will put the client's name in there because otherwise, and watch what happens on the web, there's already the Client X folder. See, like I said, it's a stream. It's kind of a live connection between the two locations. And if I go in here, I can already find the inbox. Now, Google is great on search. So when I'm on the website and I'm looking for something, if I type a search and I just type Client X, or I'm sorry, if I just type inbox, I'm going to get 100 different inboxes for 100 different clients. So that's why it's important to think about these things and make sure, even though while you're in the folder you have context, you know which client's folder you're in, think about in terms of when you're searching for this later, right? These kinds of tips have really helped me, you know, get things organized. And most importantly, it makes it super easy and fast for me to find what I'm looking for later on, right? So I can go here into inbox Client X, and anything I do here is almost instantly going to show up here on the, you know, again, what looks like the local file side, right? And of course, one of the things I really love about Google is I can go in here now and let's create another folder and we'll call it banking, right? Because this is where I'm going to put the client's bank statements. Usually what I'll do is inside the banking folder, I'll have another subfolder for each bank and each credit card that they, you know, do business with. And then I'll start putting the files in there. Right, and then how do you break it up beyond that? I'm not going to get into because that everybody has their own way of kind of doing that, right? I have a very detailed way of organizing this stuff. It's a little insane, I think, in most people's points of view. But again, the point for me is that it helps me find things easily. And the assumption and the premise that I'm going on here is that 6 months from now, when I have zero independent recollection of where something might be, I should be able to know just from my process and my structure where to go to find it. Right? And if I can't find it in 30 seconds or less, then it's not organized or it's not organized well enough. And usually then when I do eventually find it, I think back to where was the first place I went to look for it, because that's probably where it should have been in the first place, right? So you can start setting this kind of structure up. And then, of course, the one thing I really love about Google is using Google's native documents in Chrome. we have all the same stuff you have with Office, right? I have Google Docs, which is like your Word document. We have Google Sheets, which is like a spreadsheet. For most accounting and bookkeeping practices, that right there is all you need. But of course, we've also got forms and we've got slides, which is like PowerPoint. There's anything you do in Office, there's a comparable program native to Google that we can use. And of course, the big beauty of that is that it's running in the cloud. So if I want to start a new spreadsheet for a client, I open up a new tab in Chrome, and I'm just going to type sheets.new. And poof, I'm in a spreadsheet, right? And so let's just say, because this is kind of a hot topic these days, let's just say this is going to be client X cash flow. Okay, now the question, of course, is where does this document go? Well, first of all, this icon here, when you move your mouse over it, as you can see, it says move, but I can click on this, and apart from actually moving it by navigating into the structure here, I can click this little dialog launcher, and what it does is it opens up the exact folder on the website where that document is located, which, as you can see, is the root My Drive folder, right? So when I launch a new document from the browser like that, Google doesn't know that I want it in Client X's banking folder, so it just sticks it in My Drive. But here's the beauty of this. Here's how I can move this, and I can even do this while the folders are open. So I already had this open in Client X. Let's go into the banking. Again, notice I'm in the local folder here. So what I'm going to do is while I have this Windows Explorer folder open and active, I'm going to press Control-N like new, and it opens up a new window. And I have a shortcut set right to My Drive. And now I could find this, right? It was called Client X Cash Flow. So while I've got this window open, I don't even need to expand it. If I start typing client real quick, it finds it. If you remember from the old days when we used to use QuickBooks Desktop, I'm kidding, sort of, but you know how in the chart of accounts, if I want to find an account, I can quickly type the first 2 or 3 letters and it'll find that account in the list. Windows has the same little trick. And watch this. So now I'm just going to click and drag this over into their banking folder. And of course, within seconds, it will show up here. You just have to wait for it to, catch up. But there it is. So that took like less than 5 seconds. And it shows up there. And I've still got the document open. And of course, the other beauty of this is Greg and I can both be in here, for example, working on different parts of it live in real time. And all while we were doing that, I could have moved the file and it wouldn't have inhibited or interrupted our use of the file. If I'm doing this locally with like Microsoft Excel, I would have to close the file before I could move its location and then reopen it. And heaven forbid, Greg and I were trying to do that in the same document at the same time. Yes, I know there's SharePoint and I know there's Office 365, which has Excel Online, which I've already confirmed with some of my biggest Microsoft advocates. Excel Online is terrible compared to Google Sheets. The desktop version of Excel is more robust in lots of areas, but in terms of Excel Online compared to Google Sheets, Excel Online doesn't hold a candle to what this thing can do.
It's also interesting and important to note that you move the file within your Google Drive. Mm-hmm. Doesn't affect me at all.
Right. Greg can have his wherever he wants it. Because what Google is doing, obviously, is it's just creating a reference point wherever this file really lives. And it's letting Greg organize things the way he likes to, and I can organize things the way I like to, and neither one of us has to enforce the other one's sort of organizational protocols on one another, right?
Unless we're sharing folders, and in that case, you actually...
Right, yeah, of course, if we're sharing at the folder level, then yeah. So that's just a quick, excuse me, that's just a quick overview of how you can manage this stuff. And like I said, I can put any kind of document in here. I can go new, give me a new Word document. I'll just call it client notes real quick. And I'll just click back over here and we'll see it'll just another 5 seconds that'll show up. All right, and once it shows up here, it has effectively transferred to the Google side. That's where it's going to live. If I want to open up this document, even if I'm looking at it here, which is the local file side, again, it looks like it's a document like any other sitting in a folder. But the truth is, this file is living on Google server until I double-click it. The second I double-click it, it will open this file up in a temporary location so I can work in it. As soon as I close it, it kind of syncs back up. Okay, and so I just saw the chat that we've got some questions, so I'll come back to these in just a minute. So GStream doesn't remain on the desktop, right, which is kind of what I was just illustrating. Does OneDrive. As far as I know, OneDrive is like Dropbox, where it is keeping a copy of the actual file local on your computer. So it is taking up space on your hard drive. I imagine there might be an option like there is with a lot of these services where I can pick and choose which files are synced locally versus which ones live only on the web. I know you can do that with all of these now. With Dropbox and Box.com, you can pick and choose what gets synced. But the difference between all the other services and... I'm sorry?
You can even do it with Drive File Stream if there's
yeah
documents that you want to make sure you have access to offline. Say you're a traveler and like to make sure that you have a copy of certain documents on your computer at all times. You can pick and choose those documents or whole folders.
Right. Yep. So yes, you can. You have the option to work offline with files. And by the way, Drive File Stream will prompt you and ask you if you want to do that. Be very careful about saying yes, because when you initially say yes to that prompt, it assumes that you're wanting to share everything from the root level down. And all of a sudden, it's going to dump. If you have a lot of documents like I do, it's going to start dumping everything, filling up your local hard drive. So just be careful about that. And just real quick on plans and pricing, of course, go to G Suite and look at their plans and pricing. There's different options. What I recently done, thanks to Greg, who shared this with me, I was on a paid plan where I had a very high limit, but I had a limit nonetheless as to how much storage I could have. I've now switched to a plan that it's costing me probably around $75 a month, and it's unlimited storage. So I can put one of my big concerns, which a lot of you probably won't have this concern, is I work with a lot of video files where the files are quite large. And I didn't want to use Google Drive for them because of the fact that there was a storage limit. Now that it's unlimited, I can put video files in Google Drive and not have to worry about that part, right? So there's a lot of good options. And Courtney says Microsoft has Microsoft Forms. I always forget about that, but you're right. I've never actually even looked at Microsoft Forms, but I guess what you're saying is it's kind of close to Google Forms.
Yeah, Elizabeth had put a question in there asking if Microsoft had anything comparable to Google.
Oh,
Forms.
there's, I see it, sorry.
Yeah, so I was answering her question. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so then Dominique is asking, how do we collaborate with clients using, I'm sorry, Elizabeth, did you have more?
No, I was just going to say, I tried to just put the questions there so I wouldn't forget, figuring you'd get to them at the end. I didn't mean to.
No, it's fine. It's fine, because these are good questions. And so Dominique is asking about collaboration. So when it comes to sharing, and Greg kind of pointed out, like when we share at the folder level, then you are kind of stuck with, each other's organizational, choices, so to speak. So you can share at the folder level. As you can see, I'm on the website, and from here, under the banking folder drop-down, I can choose share. And what I'm going to be doing then is sharing this folder and everything in it. And everything
you can
in every
do that
subfolder.
from inside of Windows Explorer, the File Explorer as well.
You can, but doesn't it kind of launch you, like if I go here, I can say share with Google Drive.
Yeah.
But, okay, and then it just opens up the same dialog from there. Right. Now, once you're in the sharing, and the sharing works the same essentially whether you're sharing at the folder level or a file, and I can be, if I'm using a native Google format like Sheets, I can click this share button here, and all of them essentially give you the same options, right? So the one thing is, if I want to just share this with Greg, I'll share this with him. The assumption is if I'm sharing this way by putting in his email address specifically, the assumption initially is I want him to have full access rights to this file, edit, what have you. Over here, I can change that, and I can say only let him comment or only let him view, right? And of course, I can add a note letting him know, hey, I'm sharing this file with you, and here's why. And when I click send, he'll be able to get in here, and this is one of my favorite things about Google Drive and Google native documents is the ability to share and how streamlined the collaboration part of this is, right? And so the reason, by the way, that I set up the inbox for clients is a lot of times I don't want clients in my folders and files messing around. They'll mess things up. So I create this inbox, and what I'll do with this inbox is I'll share it. And the way that I'll share it is here. It says get shareable link. And then initially, because this is a G Suite account, which means it's tied to my business and my domain, initially it gives me a level of settings where only people in my organization, meaning they have to be logged in with an email with, nerdenterprises.com domain, that only people who meet that criteria could access this. But of course, if I go to more, I can say anyone with the link. I can say can view only or can organize, add, and edit. So I'll choose this option and click Save. And then I'll copy this link, and I'll give this link to my client, and I'll say, when you need to upload documents to me, this is where you do it. Bookmark this link. Do not lose it. If you lose it, of course, you can ask me for it, but I won't necessarily get it to you the second you need it. So better to just bookmark it so you don't need me. And this is how you send files to me all day long, right? Makes it very, very easy for clients to share files. In one case, I had a client who's so not tech savvy that what I did instead of this was I created kind of an alias for them. So it was like clientx@nerdenterprises.com using Google Groups, by the way, which is another thing you get with G Suite that's not available with free Gmail accounts. And then between that and Zapier, I was able to create a process where if they sent an email with an attachment to that email address, it would drop that attachment in this folder specifically. So the beauty of being in a product like Google Drive that purely lives in the cloud is the cloud-to-cloud kind of access that you get, the integrations. Zapier makes it very easy to work with and move things from one service to another. I can use Google Forms and have people upload attachments and have those attachments drop in. There's all kinds of flexibilities that I have because I'm managing everything from a place that's in the cloud.
You can also share from right inside the file. So if you go to the cash flow document, you can click on share, and then do the same thing there. One thing that I don't understand about the shareable link, and you go to more, and I do the same thing, but what's the difference between anyone on the public on the web? It says anyone on the internet can find and access. Does that mean that it's like indexed?
It's like searchable. It means it's actually searchable on the web.
Seth Turtles, they're going to find this document?
Potentially. Yeah. In other words, I never ever choose this option.
Me either.
Right? It's probably not a good idea. So yeah, but that's what this means. The only time I ever chose this option was years back. We had a Facebook group. It was like the first Facebook group I ever created for, accountants and bookkeepers. And I created a public document with this option that allowed for people to go in and kind of list their information about their business. It just gave us a way to sort of network with each other where they could put their business name, their URL for their website, and all the social media profiles that they had. For that I chose this option because I didn't want to have to sit there giving 100 people permission to access the document, and I wanted them to be able to have edit rights. So that was probably one of the only times I can remember that I ever used this option.
The only time I use it is when, like, if I'm just sharing a template with a client and I want them to make a copy that they can just share around. That's like the only time.
Yeah, but you wouldn't want to use that option that way. Even in that case, Jesse, what you'd want to do is just do anyone with the link, because that way it's not public or searchable on the web. It's only if you've given them the link that they get the access. In other words, these two are the same, but this one is searchable and public on the web, like it says. This one is not.
Gotcha.
So even in that use case, I would never use this option. I would always use this one. All right, I want to move on because, like I said, we got a lot of ground to cover. So as you can see, Greg is typing in here and working, and I can be doing the same thing. So Greg is the pink one, I'm the blue one. And where this came in really handy a few years back is I was working with a company doing some financial modeling work, cash flow analysis and projections, and this client was pretty savvy with this stuff. And so I was building the financial model for him, and I'll never forget, this is the first time where I really kind of felt the sheer effects of and the beauty of this kind of collaboration. Is I had the whole thing all built out, and I don't know what his sales are going to be. So I had him in the document, and I said, do me a favor, go in and update the sales model, meaning he was going to go in and project what revenues he was going to bring in from what clients over the next 6 months to a year or whatever. And while he was doing that, I was in a separate tab building out his fixed asset schedule, projecting the depreciation expenses and things like that to get that flowing over, the expense to the P&L and, of course, the accumulated depreciation to the balance sheet. So it was so efficient because we were both in there working in completely different areas of the model at the same time. and then we're able to both come out of our parts of it and then look at it together and say, all right, let's look at the projections. Let's see what this looks like. When are we going to run out of money, or are we going to run out of money, right? So that's, again, just another example and illustration of the power of this.
Dominique has a question about linking between Google Drive and ReceiptBank, which there is no native integration. However, what I've done, because I have the same sort of process that you do, Dominique, and what I do is I actually set up a Zap that says, okay, whenever there's a new document in a specific folder, and I point to subfolders of the main folder, so that if I drag something into the one that says XYZ client receipts, it's going to know to push it to ReceiptBank. XYZ client statements, it's going to know to just leave it there. So that's one way of getting around that lack of a native integration.
Yeah, you can't drag and drop. The other thing I do a lot is, every document in Google Drive has a unique URL. So I just grab the URL sometimes and copy and paste that. I'm going to show you an example of that later when we look at ClickUp for a bit, right? So there's lots of ways, even if there's not a native integration like that you can move things around. Like what Greg just pointed out was brilliant. I mean, and again, that goes back to, the same reason I said my use case for making it easy for the client to get documents to me, even when the client can't even handle how to, log in, how to click on a Google Drive link and upload, drag and drop files that way. So there's always ways, because of where you are, that makes this all very flexible, right? So again, to me, client management, document management, definitely Google Drive file stream is the way to go. It just gives you, and of course, from my mobile, I can easily access these documents. So when I am on the go, if a client calls me and says, hey, I need a copy of a document, in 2 seconds, I can call it up on here. Again, Google is amazing on search, so I can probably type a quick search, find their document in less than 5 seconds, and then share it with them that way. And so I see the question about naming. I'll try and come back to that at the end. I don't want to get too deep into this because I do have a bunch of other things that I want to go over. But I'll mention in one of the emails that I'm going to be sending out, I actually talk about my whole naming convention on documents. So if you've signed up for that early bird waitlist, you're definitely going to get that information. But I'll try and remember to talk about that for a couple minutes at the end. So that's the Google Drive piece. Okay. Next, let's look at ClickUp. And what I've done in ClickUp is I've got kind of like a sample accounting client template here that I've created. Now, for those of you who have zero familiarity or experience with ClickUp, it's become like our project management tool of choice for 97 and up for the most part. Most of us are using it. A few people aren't. We have a couple of people using Asana and a couple of people using other things. And, it's bottom line, it's whatever works for you. But I've fallen in love with ClickUp. And the way ClickUp is organized is you have, let's just, for the sake of simplicity and the interest of time today, you have at the highest level spaces. You can technically go up one level above that, but it's irrelevant. So you have spaces, and within each space, you have folders, right? And then within each folder, I can click on this folder. I have lists. So you see how I've got this organized where I have, if you've watched any of my stuff for more than 5 minutes, you've probably figured out that I model a lot of things after the balance sheet, right? Because the balance sheet becomes my checklist for how I keep everything going and organized and how I get things done. A lot of people ask me over the years, do you have a checklist for the monthly bookkeeping? I say, yeah, and you already have it too. It's the balance sheet, right? The checklist template that I sell that's in Smartsheet, that's very popular because it's extremely detailed and robust. But the second you look at it, you'll recognize it's built off the balance sheet. So that's how I like to organize things. So I have banking tasks. And in here is where I might create my tasks that say, reconcile the, or update the bank feeds every week. And then every month, do the reconciliation. Now, Greg and I know, have a little different process around this. My process around this is, for me, it's just every week I'm going to go through the bank feeds and update them. And if when I'm doing that, I realize, hey, we just crossed over a statement period, great, go reconcile it. So I just have one weekly task for every bank account and every credit card account. Greg, if I remember correctly, I think you have a different task for the reconciliation versus the bank feed updates, or am I wrong?
No, I only have one task for everything. And it's a task basically that says, run through the bank feeds and reconcile per the smart sheet date. So we keep a smart sheet of every account that we need to reconcile, and we cycle it through. And it's based on your template that you have shared with us in 97 and up.
Gotcha.
That it turns yellow when the date has passed. So today we're going to see a shit ton of 331s that have turned yellow now, because we're now in the phase where we go in, get the bank statements, and reconcile to the bank statements.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect. So, and again, there's no right or wrong here. It's a matter of what works for you. If it works for you, then you've got the right solution. If it doesn't work for you, then you probably need to tweak something, right? At the end of the day, you need to be able to find things quickly when you need them, right? You shouldn't be stressing out about, why can't I find the tasks that I need to perform? So, from there, you organize it however you want, right? So I typically will have a separate task for each bank account and each credit card account, and it just be, every week. And one of the things I originally loved about ClickUp is they had a really cool recurring option for tasks. And then I started using it and I loved it. And then eventually I just went back to my old way on this, which is that, and this is just my preference, rather than doing recurring tasks, I prefer to just, while I'm working on the task and completing it, I just update its due date to the next time that it's time to work on it. That works for me. Because otherwise I end up with 6 different recurrences of the task because I didn't bother to check things off when I completed them, and it just gets messy, and that drives me crazy, right? But that's my OCD. That's not necessarily yours.
There's actually 2 different ways of creating recurrences. One can be to create that new task each and every time, for every week, for example, for the bank feeds.
Right.
But you don't have to do that. You can actually just leave it.
Until to update the due date.
Until to update the due date based on when you click
when you complete it. So
the
reason I didn't even love that, and again, this is just for me,
right,
is I would either forget to mark it complete, and now I'm like, is it past due, or did I do it last week and just forget to mark it complete? Or I marked it complete, and then it went to next week, but then I'm like, wait a minute, I don't remember. Anyway, it just, again, what works for you may not work for me, and vice versa, right? So you have that part you have to figure out. I can't give you the answer on that stuff.
It works for me because it allows me visibility into my bookkeepers being able to see who's behind on what.
Right. Yeah, see, and that's probably one of the main differences there. I don't have much of a team. I have 2 people that I work with, and each of them are very much autonomous. So I kind of let them run their tasks the way they want to, and I'm like, just get it done. I just don't want to hear from the client that something's not done ever, and that's we get along well that way. But so this is the basic layout of ClickUp, and as you can see, it's got all the different layers. Now, if I go into a task, let's just say I'm going to do Wells Fargo, it gets deeper. First of all, each task can be assigned a different status. So I can say, okay, this is work in process. I can add subtasks, which then becomes like another whole task with all of a task's attendant dialogue, right? The description is awesome. If I start typing in here and highlighting, I get a nice little WYSIWYG editor. So I can have nicely formatted comments in my description on a task. And I can do the same thing with the comments. So I can comment on a task and give myself reminders of things I need to know about. Right.
Another quick thing to throw in there is how they are constantly updating and improving this product. Just in you showing me that hovering over that thing, we didn't have colors until last week.
Yeah. So, and that is a good point, Greg. Thank you for bringing that up. Is that one of the other things that makes me love a product the way I love ClickUp, and why? Is because, as Greg just pointed out, these guys are constantly updating and making the product even better. It just keeps getting better and better. And I want to clarify something on that, because a lot of times an app developer will keep adding stuff to the product, and it doesn't make it better. It might even make it more cluttered and more difficult, to use. But with these guys, every time they add things, I'm always so impressed with what a good job they do. In terms of adding these kinds of things without making it overly complex somehow, right? So where do we save the notes or standard operating procedure notes and login info? So there's a couple of things there. I mean, I don't necessarily keep login info in here, although there's no reason why you couldn't. But I'm glad you brought that up, because while I'm in ClickUp, at any level, so let's just say I go right to the ultimate level at the top here, which would be like the client name, right? I'm calling it client template. And I can, what I'm about to show you, I could also do at the folder level, and I could also do it at the list level. So any level, what I can do is up here, you'll see view, and I can add a doc. And I'll add the view. And then over here on the left, I can add pages. So you really have a nice, beautifully laid out digital notebook. As you can see, you've got the same WYSIWYG editor, so you can have nicely formatted pages and documents. And there's other ways to do this too. What I know Greg has is, you know, we also use Smartsheet a lot. So I know Greg has a Smartsheet embedded using, you use this embed code, Greg, to do that?
I used to use it the way that you're showing there as a view. However, now I've switched over to just embedding it right within the individual tasks for each client. That way it stays right there on the task that the bookkeeper is completing.
So if I'm in my, where's my accounting, banking? So right in the Wells Fargo task here, like in the description, you have it embedded?
Yeah, just type in /embed.
Got it.
And then enter, and then it'll ask you for a URL. And you gotta fiddle around with
The sizing of it or whatever.
no, not the sizing, but the sharing that you do on the Smartsheet side until you find the one that works right for your situation.
Gotcha.
And you know that could be a whole 45-minute.
Right, and keep in mind, you can also embed a Google Sheet or a Google Doc. You can embed anything in here, and it's
Grab
going to work.
the Client X cash flow just to show that you can grab that URL at the top.
So would you do it here or actually do the publish to the web option?
No, I just grab
Okay,
it
let's
from the
try it
top
that
there.
way. Let's see if that just works nice and fast. Boom. So it's a little small, but you click on it, it basically creates a link that'll take you right out to the document, right?
So what works, so you can resize that. The one for Smartsheet actually works really nicely because there's an expand or blow up button. So it takes up probably about 90% of your screen.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. And you definitely don't have that here.
Correct.
But
so
as you can see,
every integration every embed integration is going to be slightly different. So
right.
Your mileage may vary.
You're going to play with this to figure out, again, exactly what your systems are going to be, because there's so much flexibility. I could spend a whole day just talking about ClickUp and all the different ways that you can do things. So really, once you dive into this, you could, you have to figure out how you're going to do your workflow, because you might find it works better to keep client notes in Google Docs, right? Or in a few minutes, we're going to take a look at OneNote as another option for where you can keep notes and things. So a lot of times it's deciding, even though this tool might have everything you need to do almost everything you need to do, you just might like the way OneNote handles note-taking better, and you might want to do that there, right? So again, there's no right or wrong answer here. You just have to figure out what's going to work for you. Oh, look, you can resize this too, Greg, which means I can make more space if I don't click on it. Right. So again, there's lots of ways to do this.
Lots
right?
of different ways of doing it, and I'm starting to toy with a totally different one, but real life is kind of getting in the way right now.
Right. But I use these docs a lot now in ClickUp. So a lot of things that I probably would have done in OneNote before, I'm doing in ClickUp now. Just because it makes sense. If I'm managing everything else for that client here, I might as well have my notes here. And like I said, I don't see any advantage, especially because this is laid out so nicely. If this was just a simple plain text kind of notepad, I probably wouldn't want to use it. But the fact that I can organize things as much as I ever need to, I can do bullet points, I can indent things and so on, color code, bold, italics, and strike through. I've got pretty much everything that I need. Excuse me. Tony's asking, what is my template? I'm not sure I understand the question. Meanwhile, moving on.
Dominique did have a question about using OneNote with G Suite, and since you use both, I wonder what your if you integrate it at all, or if you...
So there's no integration, and especially because these are two apps in two companies that compete heavily with one another. So you're not going to find an integration, but I have certainly taken URLs for Google Documents and dropped them into a note in OneNote, right? So that I can just quickly link out to the document that I need. Especially if I want to share a document with a client. I don't love OneNote's sharing and collaboration features. I just find it to be a little clunky and difficult, whereas Google is so seamless that if I have data that I want to share with a client in a document format, I'll put it in Google Drive. If I'm keeping track of information about that client in OneNote, I'll just take the link for the document and stick it in OneNote as a quick way to get from OneNote out to where that document is, right? Let me go back here because now I want to talk a little bit about Slack. I don't need a whole lot of time on this. I just want to give you the basic premise on this. So I'm going to click this link. And by the way, Slack works beautifully like this. So it goes to the web, but then it asks me to open Slack. What I did was I generated a link to a specific Slack channel that was in a specific Slack workspace. And now I can bring it up on screen, right? So Slack is definitely my communications channel of choice. As you can see on the left, I am logged into many, many different Slack workspaces. If you're going to use Slack, you definitely do not want to use it on the web. You don't want to use Slack in your browser. It was not designed to work well that way, because if you have 10 different clients, you need to have 10 different tabs open in your browser to do that. Whereas here, I've got them neatly tucked away on the side. And by the way, if I want to switch to one of them and I know the name, I can press Control-K, and I can just type any client's name, and it's going to come up, right? So this is one of my clients called the Fula Enterprises. So I love Slack because, and the reason I bring this up specifically is a lot of the sort of pushback I get from other accountants and bookkeepers when I'm suggesting this, and especially when I'm suggesting setting up this way where each client gets their own workspace, is, oh, I did so many channels, how do you manage that? And the answer is it's very simple. I press Control-K, and in 3 keystrokes, and a return key, I can be in that client's workspace. And I can use the same Control-K to jump to different channels, right? Now notice how I've got my channels organized. As I mentioned earlier, and you can sort of recognize this here, I build it initially off the balance sheet, and then I add other things as I go, right? Now it's alphabetical, so it's not perfect world. I would have banking at the top because I would have it, conform to the balance sheet, and I could certainly name it in such a way that it would follow suit with that, but I haven't found that necessary. But you can see I have banking, I have accounts receivable, I have examples of if my client has a particular client of their own where AR is an issue. This came out of an example I gave of this in another webinar I did once, where I can create AR-client X, meaning we need to focus on this one particular client's accounts receivable. They're a problem, we're having trouble collecting. So the point of this is the same way you would think of the subject line in an email that you'd send that describes what the conversation's about. That's how I think you want to think about naming your channels in Slack, right? What's the main subject? And the idea here is that things should be organized, categorized, and easily referenced, right? Again, it goes back to the same thing as with the project management part of things. I need to be able to find what I'm looking for, and I need to be able to find it quickly, right? I don't want to start sweating and getting stressed out because I can't find something that I desperately need. Plus, Slack has some amazing features. I'll give you an example. I'm going to jump into our 97 and up Slack workspace here, and I'm going to click in the search. Watch what happens if I search for 1099. I noticed this earlier in the year when 1099 was a big issue. And if I don't actually choose one of the suggestions and I just hit the enter key to search, try that again. Or maybe I do have to select the search option because this is the channel. We actually have a channel for 1099s. Here, I'll just click the search option. And if I go here to people, this gives me a list of all the people who are talking about 1099s. So Slack has almost a little bit of like AI where it analyzes who's talking about what. So if I want to find out who are the people that are talking about 1099s, you just saw how that can be done very quickly and easily, right? And think of any subject that you might be looking for information on who's talking about what, and that's how you can find it. And if I do this and I go back to the search, and there's all kinds of other search options you can do. This goes back to my client channel, which is my sample client channel. So that's the basic layout of Slack. And again, as I was starting to say, the search feature is amazing in Slack. You can search for anything that was posted by Greg today, right? You can get real specific about what you're looking for.
Really got to be careful about that one.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that now. So anyway, that's hopefully gives you the idea of Slack. And again, I can spend probably a 3 or 4 hour webinar showing you everything there is to learn about Slack. On the surface, it looks and seems like it's very simple, but when you really learn how to use this tool, you start to find out more and more just how powerful it is. You can pin things to a channel that creates like a bookmark for everybody in that channel. You can also star things. And I found that I was starring things, which is like a to-do item, that the intent was to go back and address them later, and I was forgetting to do it. So I created a zap for each of my Slack workspaces that says if I star something, add it as a task in ClickUp. And while you're adding it as a task, I want you to include the entire message from that Slack message that I starred. And I also want you to stick a link to that Slack message into the description of that task in ClickUp. What that allowed me to do is use ClickUp as my project management tool, which is what it's meant to be. And I could click on those Slack tasks that it created, and from within that Slack task, I was able to click a link, and it would take me right over to where the original message was, so I could type a reply and do whatever follow-up was needed or appropriate. So it's a very powerful communications tool. Erica, who works with me, always tells me that she doesn't even hardly use email anymore, because all of our communications with all of our clients are pretty much in Slack. It takes a little bit of training in the beginning, especially if the client wasn't already using Slack. But once we start kind of training them and redirecting them to stick with Slack, they start, they get it. They start learning it, and they always end up thanking me for pushing it on them. Always, always, always. I have a client who is a 70-year-old artist who uses Slack, who stood online at the bank one day with his mobile device, messaging me in Slack saying, "Seth, can you send me the list of checks we need copies of?" And I was able to drag and drop that Excel file into Slack, and he was able to get it and get the copies because he forgot to bring it with him. So do I keep Slack open all day? Oftentimes, yes, but if I really need to focus and I don't want the distraction, then I go right in here into my application tray, right-click, and quit. And then I just open it later when I'm ready to be distracted again. So that can become an issue, just like email is. And you have to remember something, and I think this is another thing that concerns accountants and bookkeepers that I've talked to about, using Slack with clients. Just because you use Slack with the client and the client can go in there anytime and post a message, doesn't mean you have to give them an instant answer. Just like email, in my opinion, the etiquette is 24-hour turnaround time on any responses, right? And that's what I usually tell clients. I actually say 1 business day, so if I want to, I can take the weekends off, right? But I usually say I'll always get back to you within a business day, same as I've always done with email. There's no reason you have to answer right away. And if I get a message and I know I've just gone into it, but I want to remember that I need to go back to it, again, there's a lot under the hood. Notice as I move my mouse over, right? And if I want to, let's say I wanted to remember this message for some reason from Slackbot, I can click over here on the ellipsis and I can mark it unread. That will cause the channel to light up the way channels light up when there's any unread messages in there, right? So that's one way of getting reminded. But of course, as soon as you click in there, it gets marked red. So like I mentioned, I can star it. There's all kinds of ways I can do it. There's also a remind command. I could say /remind me to follow up with Slackbot at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Boom. Tomorrow I'll get a reminder from Slackbot to follow up with Slackbot. And I'm going to get that message tomorrow now. I'm going to be like, what? And then I'm going to remember, oh yeah, I did that in the webinar. So there's a lot of / commands in Slack that are awesome. Somebody say something?
No.
Okay. Perfect. So next, we have OneNote. So OneNote, especially since I know we have some OneNote users in here, I'm not going to spend too much time on, but here's a sample client notebook. I usually have a section for meetings, a section for admin. This might be a place where I might keep some passwords, and I would just I would protect that page. I'd password protect the page that's got that information. So I've done that in some cases. And again, you would want to decide how you're going to organize the notebook in terms of sections and pages and where you put stuff. And I often will create another section and just call it inbox. Because if I just need a place where I can stick something on the fly and organize it later, that's what the inbox is for, right? So I'll do that, and then it's one of the things I really love about OneNote is I can take a page from OneNote and just drag and drop it into the admin section, and boom, it should go into the admin section when I do that. There, you have to hold it for a second, and then I can continue to drag and drop it here. So that's one of the things I love about OneNote is the flexibility, the way you can move things around like that very easily, right? You could also right-click the page and move it to another area. So OneNote, very flexible. And as you can see, I've got a full-fledged editor, not much different than an actual Word document, where I can do all kinds of things. I can tag things, and I can search by tags. OneNote has a lot of really powerful stuff under the hood that I can use. So I encourage you to play around with it. I used to use Evernote. Actually, first I used OneNote. Then I left OneNote for Evernote. Then I went back to OneNote because the other thing is OneNote's mobile app is awesome, right? The reason I left OneNote is it lacked the whole cloud side many years ago. But they have gotten so far ahead of that curve now that I absolutely love using OneNote. Although, like I said, a lot of what I was doing in OneNote is now being done in ClickUp because I love ClickUp's documents feature. And last but definitely not least, we have Dynalist. And Dynalist itself, Elizabeth, are you still using Dynalist substantially as your project management choice? You're muted.
I know. I always hit the wrong mute button. I always go for the one on the picture. I am using it to do daily to-do lists, but I'm trying to get myself into ClickUp. So
okay.
I'm kind of sketching out what I need in Dynalist to bring over.
Right. So just real quick, Dynalist, I always like to refer to it as bullet points on steroids, right? But Dynalist also has a lot of really cool features under the hood. So I might have client X here, right? And then I hit enter and hit tab. Now I'm at the next level, and I could say banking, accounts receivable, right? Again, just following the format of the balance sheet and so on. Sales tax is in sales tax payable and so on. And you can focus by clicking on the bullet point. I can go right in and focus just on client X or focus just on their banking, right? And over here, I can say Wells Fargo. And if I hit an exclamation point, there has to be a space. I can't be right on top of a letter. If I hit a space and hit an exclamation point, it brings up a calendar, which effectively I can use to assign a due date, right? And it even has some recurring options, daily, weekly, Monday on the 30th, or custom, right? So Dynalist also has some really cool stuff under the hood. I can also format things, right? It uses Markdown. That's what you see when you see the double asterisks around it. And I can also color code things this way. So Dynalist has an awesome mobile app too. Dynalist mobile app, it's one of those mobile apps that does everything that the desktop side of the product does. And a lot of mobile apps don't. A lot of mobile apps are kind of, chiseled down versions of the real app that you end up wanting to use in your desktop. But especially if I'm on the go and I just need to quickly on the fly whip something out where I can quickly take a note, Dynalist is the best. I have at the top right of my home screen on my mobile, I have a thing called projects, and Dynalist is right in there. So in 2 seconds, I can be taking notes, right on my mobile. And of course, as quickly as I can do that, I can be over here on the desktop and I can be editing those same notes. So again, really, really slick, powerful mobile app. There's a lot of people, Elizabeth, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but Elizabeth came to me months ago and said, I don't know what to do for a project management app. There's 8 million choices out there. I don't know where to start. And that's when I said, you know what, start with Dynalist because it's just simple and it's easy to use and it's easy to figure out how to structure it, right? Because we can all get with that linear structure with different levels and sub-levels and so on. And what I really love is the fact that you can drill in and focus on any level within. And notice across the top in my screen, it has the trail of breadcrumbs, right? So I can see exactly where in my whole structure this is located. You can also bookmark things, right? So I can bookmark things that I want quick access to. You can use hashtags, which is kind of another bookmark, right? And so this will, if I click on one of these, it's going to get me all the, notes that I have in here with the apps hashtag and so on, right? So again, I like it because it's neat. Things are tucked away. It gives me a lot of room to work, but I'm able to get what I need and I'm able to get it done quickly and I'm able to find what I need when I need it quickly. And to me, that's the most important thing. And that's pretty much everything I had planned to cover in terms of tools today. These were, like I said, the top kind of 4 apps that everyone said they wanted to see more of, right? More than 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 apps actually. And of course, we spent the most time on G Suite because that is clearly what everybody said they wanted the most of. So let's see if there's any questions I haven't addressed yet. Oh, the renaming thing. Let me show you. It's, again, because you have a side of it that can be accessed on Windows. From that side, you can rename files the same way you would rename any file. So this one that's called Client Notes, I can change to Client Notes X the same exact way I would if it were just a, you know, if it were the same Microsoft Office doc, you know, that wasn't in Google Drive. I can even, from the Windows side, right-click the native Google document format, and I can rename it in the same way. Client X Cash Flow, and I can say like V2. And of course, in seconds, that name will update here on the website of it. You know, it might take like 5 seconds. There it is. And of course, in the native Google Doc, I can click right in here to rename it. And if I'm in the folder, which I guess I closed, if I'm in the web side of the folder, I can also right-click any document. Oh, I'm in the, I thought I had reorganized that. Didn't I move this?
Yeah, it's in banking.
Yeah, that's weird. Let me try that again. Or let's just open.
You're hitting the expand on your My Drive folder, though.
But no, this expander in this file should take me to wherever this file is located. For some reason, it still sees this file as being in, well, here, let's do it this way. Windows, I'm in banking, right-click, open with Google, or yeah, open with Google Drive. Let's do it that way. All right, now let's, this one's taking a minute. See, now it's finding it in banking because that was the original version of the document before I'd moved it. So from the folder side in Google Drive, I can also right-click any document, and there's a rename option here. So lots of ways to do this. Somebody's asking me, what kind of cell phone do I use? I have a Google Pixel 3 XL. In case you haven't noticed, I kind of like Google stuff. So it's a Pixel 3 XL, but any Android will work beautifully with the Google world because it's all made by Google. So that's the beauty of it is I can go anywhere. I can throw my computer in the garbage and I won't lose a thing. I'll have access to all of it. I buy a new computer, I log into my Google account, and I'm instantly in my world and have access to everything, including my photos, because even those are in Google Photos. Any other questions that I did not answer? All right, well, if nobody else has any other questions, then I will have this recording up on the site very soon. I will, of course, email everyone as soon as it is up. And don't forget, just about any page on my site has that big red ribbon at the top. You can click on it and get on the early bird waitlist for my 6-video series. And then for those who are interested, the bonus offer I'm coming out with for Bulletproof Bookkeeping, which again is going to include a 6-week training series with me. And we'll just go through basically the top of the balance sheet to the bottom and how to make a set of books bulletproof according to me over a 6-week period. So that's going to be offered as a bonus for people who sign up. Then people who are already in the course, I'm going to give you an option, obviously, which is not going to cost as much because you've already paid for the course. So stay tuned for all of that. Anyway, I think that's enough out of me before I speak more and get into trouble. My wife's on the other side of the house. She can hear everything I say. What?
More trouble.
More trouble. Exactly. More trouble. Melissa says I love LastPass. All right, I'm going to run. I want to make sure the recording comes in under an hour so I don't have to edit it down to under an hour because I like my recordings to be under an hour so I can post them on Instagram. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You all know how to find me if you have any other questions or follow-ups. I'm pretty easy to find, so just reach out to me in whatever of the many ways that there are that you prefer, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day. Stay home and stay safe.